Just give it a couple of minutes to give everyone a chance to join before we start.
For those coming in, I'd love to see where on planet Earth are you joining us from today? Pop in the chat a little hello and where you're from. Let's see if we've got a global audience. I think we've got the chat function activated, Kels, haven't we?
We have indeed.
There we are. Got Jess from Canandaigua, New York. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Probably not. Esther from Amsterdam. Got people from London. Jess says, well done. Thank you. I've passed the first test. This is going to be a great webinar. We got people from Charlotte, NC, North Carolina. We got Owain. Welcome. Good to see you, Owain, from lovely Kent. All right. Good stuff. It's good to see so many people drop in. We should get going.
Yeah. Let's formally kick things off. So, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are. My name's Kelsey. I'm with the Allego marketing team, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's webinar, Stop Wasting Money on Training, How to Ramp and Retain Top Sales Talent. So Allego is a market-leading sales enablement platform that elevates performance for sales and other teams by combining learning, content, and collaboration into one app, all designed for the flow of work. Joining us today, we have more sales expertise from EngageTech and EngageIQ, the prospecting platform for accurate data insights and target accounts, enabling salespeople to speak to the right people at the right time. How's that as a pitch? Before I hand over to our lovely hosts today, I have a couple of housekeeping points to cover off. If you provided a valid US mailing address when signing up for today's webinar, you'll receive a free copy of Mastering Virtual Selling, Orchestrating Sales Success, which was written by two of Allego's co-founders, Yuchen Lee and Mark Magnacca, as well as sales guru Tony Deary. If you didn't provide your address, you can do so in the chat tab, and I can make sure that you get a copy of that book. At the end of the webinar, there's a short 3-question survey that helps us to keep improving these events. So we really value your feedback. And if you can take a moment to complete the survey, it just makes sure that we can keep delivering for you guys. The session is being recorded and an on-demand link will be shared in the next day or two. And we've reserved time at the end of today's program for live Q&A. So please submit your questions and we can address them all at the end of the session. That is all from me, and I'm thrilled to pass you over to today's presenters. We've got Rich Smith, who is VP of Sales at Allego, and Iona Lawner, who is SDR Manager at EngageTech. Off you go, guys.
All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Great to have so many people join us today. For today's webinar, Stop Wasting Money on Training, How to Ramp and Retain Top Sales Talent. Quite a strong title. Especially coming from a guy who works for a sales enablement company, is to stop wasting money on training. So hopefully I'll put some more meat in the bones, and delighted to have Iona here who can start to give some more kind of in the trenches thoughts and opinions on how she executes ongoing training to ramp and retain top sales talent at EngageTech. So just to kind of cover off what we set in the abstract of the webinar, here's the kind of key points that I hope you guys are going to take away from today. Because unfortunately, when I look back over the past, my career in sales, which is, knocking on sort of 14 years now, the way that we train our salespeople is still as broken as it was when I joined, and when I first joined in sales, which really kind of looks a little bit like this. I kind of I was hired by my company, and I'd be kind of like almost given all this information and just sort of sent out there to kind of make it happen. This kind of way of working, this way of training salespeople, we're still doing it. Still see this consistently in many organizations, and it doesn't work anymore. We're going to talk a little bit about why it doesn't work, and some crucially some more effective ways of doing it. And part of that is going to be talking about this transition from just in case learning, which is, hey, this is the training that you need to do as like tick box based exercises when you join the business, to more of this just in time style of learning, which if you think about, we actually use a lot of just in time learning in our personal life. We want to, this happened to me the other day. If I want to learn how to attach a plug on my new oven, I have no idea how to do that, but I need to learn that skill at that specific point in time. And so I go and find out how to do it. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But we're also going to talk about how to implement a killer coaching program that scales, because, the data is still there that tells us that the majority of salespeople crave coaching. There's the data that backs it up to say that coaching works. It drives improvement on the bottom line. But a lot of companies are still struggling to kind of continue that ongoing development of their salespeople past that initial onboarding. And yeah, we're going to just kind of bring to the table really modern approaches that are going to be better utilized and adopted by your sales teams, and is all designed to help you get more out of your existing team, which is really pertinent right now when companies may not be hiring as much in today's climate, and they may be looking at, hey, how can we get more out of our existing team, and how can we make our tenured high performing reps even better than they are today? So let's kind of really get into it by talking about the challenge. So as I alluded to, in my own experiences, when I started off in sales, my onboarding looked a little bit like this. Joined the company on day one, and I have like a 4-week calendar booked solid 9 till 5 with everything that I need to learn in order to be a successful salesperson. Everything from here's the product, here's the market, here's the competition, here's the objections, here's the value propositions, you name it. It was the equivalent of sticking a hose pipe in my mouth, turning the tap on and saying, boom, here's all this information like that you need to be successful. And at the end of that 4-week period, well done, you've completed your onboarding. Now go ahead and execute. And maybe some of you are, I'd love to see in the chat if that kind of concept resonates with anybody, please just put the word yes in the chat. I just want to see if you've experienced that maybe historically in your career, or maybe you kind of still see elements of this today. We bring on new people and we say, right, here's all the information that you need to be successful. And I can see the yeses coming through Iona. We've got the right people on board here. And here's the thing, people forget what they've learned. Like, I remember trying to revise for exams back in the day. And even though I'd been studying these things for my GCSEs, I'd been doing all these lessons for the entire school year. Like, there's a reason that at the end of it, I still tried to cram in loads of revision the day before the exam. Why? Because I'd forgotten most of the stuff that I learned 6 months ago. We have the same problem in sales. Formal training is one size fits all. We say, hey, we've created our program, and this program and this content is going to be relevant for everybody that we bring on board. Unfortunately, it isn't. We have different people at different job roles that need to learn different things. We have people who learn at different paces and different styles. And let's not forget the time and distance barriers. Again, if you and your sales team are even partly remote, just put the word remote in the chat. I just want to see how many of you out there now have a sales team who, at least in part, are actually not sat in the office next to you anymore. Okay, we've got plenty of remotes coming in. And maybe combine that with time zones. Many of us out there are kind of running people in different countries and different teams, and it's difficult to, hey, I want to train my salesperson on this topic, but guess what? They start work at 9 a.m. when it's my 5 p.m. and my wife's going to get angry because I'm not going to be ready to sit down for dinner. Here's all the challenges of what we are facing. And this formal training is just the opposite of how we learn effectively. Iona, I've got a quick question for you. When was the last time you went on YouTube to learn to do something that you didn't learn?
Oh, God. I think it's the first time I probably feel like I'm sounding old. I actually haven't. Probably, oh God, probably how to poach an egg. I'd say the start of this year was my last YouTube tutorial.
Brilliant example, right? Okay, simple skill for many people, but actually poaching an egg is actually very difficult. Lots of people pretend it's an easy skill. But here's the thing. I'm going to guess that you wanted to learn how to poach that egg because you wanted to have a poached egg for your breakfast or your dinner that day, right? And this is a great example of what did you do? You went to YouTube to find out how to poach an egg. And this is how we learn in our personal lives. The car tire's flat. I need to replace the car tire. I've never done it before. What do? I want to learn that now. I don't want to learn it now for like 6 months' time. I want to learn it in my moment of need. And this is the modern day of learning. It's the modern approach of learning. It's how we learn in our personal lives. So why do we not apply this in the world of sales training when we bring on board our salespeople? Everybody I speak with knows the forgetting curve, knows it's a problem, knows that 50 to 80% of knowledge can be lost even the day after learning that skill, and pretty much the entire thing lost within 30 days. Everybody knows this stuff, but guess what? We almost try and just pretend it doesn't exist. We say, hey, here's all this information, and we're going to pretend that you actually remember it and understand it 2 months, 3 months down the line. We almost kind of pretend that it doesn't exist when it comes to how we onboard and train our salespeople. And the informal learning, this approach that we hear from the market is that salespeople and high-performing sales reps say that that approach to learning doesn't work for them. In fact, what works for them is observing how other people on their sales team sell. That's what they really crave. They want to get feedback from their peers on how they executed in their own sales calls. These are the ways that sellers actually want to learn. They don't want to sit down and do, here's like 3 hours worth of courses. They want to learn from other people doing the role. Maybe people doing the role better than they're doing it. And research shows that professionals learn best when they receive 90% of their learning informally and experientially. So this is me not saying we should ditch the formal learning. It's that the balance is all wrong. We should be looking at actually how can we give our sales reps stuff that is much more about informal learning in their moment of need, but essentially experiential, getting them to learn off others' real life selling situations. And this is just to kind of get a mini sort of sales pitch out the way. This is kind of, Allego helps with this in numerous different ways. You can create bite-sized content, rather than 3-hour courses. Can you create a 3-minute video that gives people the information they need? It makes it easy to access. As a salesperson, I don't need to be enrolled in a course to learn that material. I can just go and access it in my moment of need. I can get access to content on my phone when I'm walking the dog or when I'm on the treadmill. But I can also crucially get examples from the field. I can learn from what my peers are doing, and Iona's going to share some great examples of how her team are doing that very soon. And there's lots of ways that you can add agile learning to your mix at zero cost. You can create best practices, get the sales team to create best practice examples of how they would handle an objection. You can get the salespeople to practice these skills immediately after learning it, and that could be in the form of role playing with an AI generated bot. You can invite your peers to give you feedback, whether that's from a short recording that you've done yourself or even a real life sales call, which we'll jump into. Hey, I've just had a call here with a prospect. Please give me some feedback on what you think, how you think I did. And you can start to create those libraries of best in class, great examples, great example pitches, great example calls that sellers can get access to. I want you to imagine how much faster could your reps get onboarded and up to speed if, as part of their onboarding, they could access a library of great real life calls that their colleagues have actually been involved in. So here we go. So we're going to tell you, like, now that we've touched upon some of the ideas, we're going to talk about how you can actually implement coaching that skills. And this is where Iona's going to come in and give some suggestions. But I guess the question I've got Iona, is when it comes to motivating your teams, how do you leverage technology at EngageTech to get your sellers to basically coach your reps, and how do they kind of gain real life feedback from you on how they performed in those situations?
Good question. I think a good sort of starting point is the structure we have at EngageTech and EngageIQ is actually the SDR managers aren't there just telling you what you need to do, but actually SDRs themselves. So you've got someone that's actually giving you the the best advice possible for what's working for them. I think motivation is a bit more of like a separate conversation, isn't it? Because it is all around. So like, it's really bad like comparison right now, but I'm sure you know like the 5 languages of love. Like, what are people's motivations? How do they receive feedback? What do they need to actually trigger like a light bulb moment? A lot of people might be actually quite creative. Is that like a whiteboard moment? Is that something they need to do, like you draw on PowerPoint if they're working from home, for something to understand? What I'm actually like finding at the moment is a lot more people actually being like finding analogies a lot more relatable.
Yeah.
And especially where like the climate we're in at the moment. So that analogy just happened. Realistically, sometimes it's been quite confusing, especially when people are going through that training, constant training all day in, day out. They can't actually relate it to something they're really familiar with. It's like if someone says they've got like a contract in for a competitor and they've got another 12 months, and they're like, oh, how do I get away from this like objection? Then you can actually just either like send them a call, but actually put in a real life example of that is, Rich, like what phone do you have?
iPhone.
What iPhone?
iPhone 11, I think it is.
Oh, nice. But an iPhone 11 isn't the best out there, is it? I mean,
there's far better models.
There's no way you want the iPhone 11 for the rest of that duration, right?
Right. I want to
It's
upgrade.
understanding like what would you need from your next phone, and why is that a priority? But
Yeah.
some people like detach that example from when they're on the phone and getting those objections. So it's just being there with like real-time examples, creating things to really understand like what actually is understandable, and hopefully that progression is a motivation for them.
I think that's really valuable, of like this helping people connect with things in their personal life and bring it into like the stuff that they're dealing with every day. Because a lot of people, when you get them to think about the decisions that they make, and the buying decisions they make in their personal life, actually becomes really applicable. So I love that example of just kind of getting them to think about stuff that's important to them in their personal life, and then trying to relate it to something that they're struggling with. And when you've got people who in your team, you've got people working on different schedules, or they're not in the office. How do you manage that when you come to ongoing training and coaching them, and kind of, you're not necessarily the luxury of sat next to them in the office anymore, and being, you're available, you're free at the time that they're free. How do you manage that at the minute?
I think it's quite difficult because we do have quite a busy office, and we do have people in like different sort of countries. I think like a good example for this is actually myself when I first started at EngageTech. So I started on like March 7th, 2020. So only 5 working days, and then boom, we went into a national pandemic with a company that has no prior experience to remote working. You go into sort of I'm trying to think of the word, but into like mission mode, don't you? I think, how did my manager at the time try and keep me engaged, not go downstairs every day thinking about whether I've got a job or not? I'm last in, probably first out. It's around like, how often are you having that face-to-face contact? On not face-to-face contact, but over the screen, having those calls whilst you're doing live examples, having those pitches, and just being able to get as many reps in as much as possible, and being able to share that time with your manager so you're getting the right feedback.
Yeah.
But a lot of offices these days a lot of teams don't have that base, and they don't go into the office, and they're restricting themselves from that development. And it's important for the manager to figure out how they do that online.
Yeah. And from my own experiences there, one of the things I struggled with without technology, back in the day, is my manager was super busy. They would often not be in the office. They were out on the road at meetings, or what have you. And actually getting the ongoing development that I needed was really hard. Like, they had their best intentions. When they were in the office and I was in the office, we could sit down together. But the problem was that when I needed that support, it was it was there and then. It wasn't like, hey, I've just had this challenging situation. Like, use your example before, Iona, of like, hey, I've just had this objection on a call and I got no idea whether I did the right thing or whether I did a good enough thing to deal with that. I needed help there and then. I couldn't wait like another week before my next one-to-one sit down with the manager, because I might actually face that same challenge 10, 20 times more between that now and then. And that was super frustrating, because if you think about it, my development was actually handcuffed because I was basically working to a schedule where my manager would be kind of in person at the same time as myself. I'm not sure if you've kind of ever experienced that in your own career.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's one of those things, isn't it? It's just like you're too busy but you're actually not doing anything like efficient, and like the main role is especially just to try and perform and keep your team happy. I think like a good example here is, especially with sorry, I was a bit of a mind blank then, but especially where we have like a bit of structure. So I know these days there is that autonomy and having no structure, but sometimes it's just really important, especially for those that are less developed where they are in their career. I think probably advice to any other SDR managers is ensuring that you have available time that also replicates your team's time. So is there best times of the day that data suggests that you should be calling and like outbound prospecting? That time is when your like manager should be available also. One for leading in front, leading by example, but secondly, being able to give them that real time that advice, feedback, and making sure that when they go into that next call, they're ready. They've got that feedback. How can they be so coachable, suck it up as a sponge, and then go into the next call knowing what they need to improve? Because there has been occasions I definitely waited like 2 days for feedback. I'm sure my team have waited maybe a day longer than they should, and actually I'm only stunting their focus, their eagerness to develop, them being challenged, etc.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's kind of move on and onto this next way of like, how do you kind of continue that training and learning past that initial training or onboarding that people get, to self-coaching, right? Like we so often we assume that coaching has to be driven by the managers, has to be like, hey, ongoing development has to be driven by managers, but actually there's so much value that can get from self-coaching. I don't know if I want to talk about examples of where your team kind of self-develop themselves. How do they go about doing that today?
Oh, that is good. We've recently, over the last sort of 2 quarters, we've implemented where you get like an afternoon to self-develop. So it is dependent on what roles you want to go into, but that time to actually really focus on how to self-develop. I think like first and foremost is actually being able to allow your teams to feel like they can do that. And being able to give them the flexibility and like think time and thought process around what they actually want to learn. Because yes, every business has a structure, has an onboarding process, but realistically, what are they struggling with? What do they need to learn? And I think this is where like a good example is using the like Allego best practices. It's just typing in those keywords and you get X amount of examples of where your like a teammate, similar situation to you, has been able to do that. But it does take a certain person to step out of their comfort zone or feel like they have or can like self-coach.
And that's a great example of like, hey, I'm going to go and seek out somebody on my team who has run into this before or who's had more success than me. Have you ever seen any examples of where people have actually listened back to their own calls and kind of learned from just themselves? Like they've almost self-identified their own mistakes or the things that they need more help on.
Oh, 100%. I think it's the best like thing to do on Monday morning. It's the worst time of the week, isn't it? No one comes in thinking I can't wait to pitch, and if you do, great, come join our team. But it's how do you restore that belief in your team? A good example of what we did here was I actually sent them their first call. So it's actually a group of people that have been in the business for 5-6 weeks, so not a long time. They're going through that development period, and it's really difficult because you're coming in every day, you're trying your best, you're giving 100%, and they don't actually I'm trying to think a way to say this, but what I did was actually send them their first calls they ever made and say,
Right.
can you send me the feedback on this? And I usually get a few laughing faces, or I get, oh no, I'm cringing at the sound of my own voice, or I've changed so much in that 4 weeks, 5 weeks. We roll into days every day, and Rich, I'm sure you might like resonate with this. Is like, how much have I developed? It's just a new day, another day, right? It becomes quite mundane until you actually can reflect on how far you have come in that short amount of time. If that's going to motivate anyone, it should motivate you to be like, imagine me in 4 weeks, another 4 weeks, imagine me in 4 years. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Good way to
That
start
kind of
Monday.
classic thing of like, get 1% better every week, and like that soon kind of accumulates. And this is one of the ways that a lot of our customers are leveraging technology, where they can actually capture. It could be their own calls that they're making. It could be their own demos. It could even be just them practicing for a pitch that they've got coming up, and they can obviously have the ability to watch back, but they can start to listen to their peers and start to learn. Hey, this person who's having more success than me right now, what are they saying, or how are they saying it? How are they dealing with it different than me? And a lot of the time, that just takes away the pressure that we have as managers to always be the ones responsible for the ongoing training of our reps, when it's, we've all got very busy schedules. But these things don't just happen naturally. We have to be serious about make a commitment to our salespeople of ongoing development. It's no use just kind of saying that we're going to do it, but actually not doing it. So Iona, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about kind of what your actual coaching routine looks like. How do you make sure that this happens in your busy schedule? And what are some of the approaches that you found have worked before to really make sure that this just doesn't drop off your calendar?
Yep. I think first instance is actually just diarising it.
Yeah, great point.
And I think for us, like as managers, to expect commitment, we also need to commit to our team on an individual basis every single week. And it's how much time are we giving someone each week? For example, if it, like Rich, if you only had one sales call a week, and someone said, Rich, why aren't you closing more? You'd be like, well, if you increase that talk time or increase the sales funnel, I'm going to be having like double my chances. It's the same with your team, but having that half an hour, bit more of a coaching, how you finding the role, etc., and then also having that 40 minutes fixed every single week. You both have to be there, you both have to be focused, you both have to be in the room and present and ready, and that's for the coaching. And I think that's a good time to collate all of the things that have happened that week. Is it best at the end of the week or the start of the week? Who's your priority? Where do they fit in that week? But also reviewing how those sessions are going, because I've definitely been on sessions before, and sometimes again it's how motivating am I? Have they come off that session and felt better, that they've learned something? And it's ensuring that I get the feedback from them as well, and enabling them to feel like they have the platform to do that. But first and foremost is definitely just having that fixed time each week and ensuring what is it that they need to learn this week. How can I go in prepared? Can I send them a snippet of what we're going to be discussing in that call, so they're prepared to come with real life scenarios? Can we jump on to calls and listen to them and think of different things that we could have said, thought out the box, less tick boxy, or their tones tone's boring. If I speak like this, it's a bit boring. I'm sure the listeners are going to go off. But if you're there, or you can actually probably feel your reps smiling or how they're standing. And it's actually like doing that with them can make them feel a lot more like just a lot more like effective and like there and in real time.
I think one of the key points I took from what you've just said there as well is that coaching routine and making those coaching sessions actually valuable for the salesperson, that they come away feeling like they have got something out of it. And I'll mention why this is important, because we have done our own surveys here that say, where we've asked salespeople, how often do you get coaching from your managers, and that you deem to be useful, that you deem to be effective.
Yeah.
And actually, the majority of people who respond to that question say never. Yet the sales managers say that they coach their reps regularly. So what that says is either someone's not telling the truth, or if the managers are telling the truth, what they're doing, their salespeople are not seeing it as effective. It's not helping them. They're not coming away from that session feeling motivated. They're not feeling like they've learned something that they can put into practice. And why this is so key when you use technology is that, as you've hinted at, is that your coaching sessions, your ongoing training of those salespeople isn't based on just kind of gut instinct, like, oh, what do you feel you're not doing very well right now? You're actually basing on data. Well, actually, let's listen to what you're actually doing in your day job, and we'll make this super relevant based on reality versus what you think you need or what I think you need.
It's tough, isn't it? Especially when you're asking people that haven't been in the role for longer than 3 months, that have just joined the company, what they need to improve, or where they feel like they're not doing well at and need training in, when realistically that should be coming from the SDR manager to identify where that is, where the gaps are. And that's what I meant with like the preparation into those training sessions. So you already know what's falling short, and also just hearing them what they think as well, but going in with that in that way.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next kind of way that you can kind of ditch the old form of training and move to a more modern approach, is using technology to kind of develop reps at scale. And the way that we do this with Allego is we use AI to start to give valuable insights into what's actually going on across your entire team. That could be everything from, how much they're talking on calls, how many questions they're asking, even the types of topics of conversation that are coming up in calls. And it kind of starts to give us data on, the people who are successful, what are they doing differently to the people who maybe are in the middle of the pack, to maybe who isn't successful. Iona, do you want to kind of share with us how you leverage these types of insights that you glean from calls to kind of figure out key data points on, what's going well and what isn't in your team?
Yeah. I think like it's a bit tough, isn't it? I think sometimes we have generic metrics. How many emails, how many dials are made, how many contacts have they sourced relevant to their campaign or their company, when actually really getting into the nitty gritty, what is happening on those calls and why? How quickly can we change this, like a scenario? And I think that goes into the last point about identifying where people and what they need. I think a good example is like objection handling. How many people or prospects on calls can mention the word cost? And then what are the next 20 seconds of your reps saying after that to open it up?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing, isn't it? Because you got the 3 main sort of issues at the moment. People always reference either resource, functionality of their teams, or either budget and cost. So it's like, how are we getting our teams to, if someone says cost, what's next?
Right.
It's always getting that next question. But yeah.
And I'll kind of bring this using the kind of analogies that we were speaking at, and why, when we think about our personal life, as to why we don't do this as much in the work life. Like, let's imagine, so I'm in the process of learning how to play golf. Okay, so I've literally signed up, and I've got a golf coach who's giving me giving lessons. what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to kind of sit and just be taught how to play golf. I didn't want to sit in a classroom and have someone that told me this is how you play, this is how you swing a club. What I wanted was to hold a golf club and hit a ball and have someone actually watch what I do. Where are my flaws? Like, what's my grip? Like, what am I doing with my grip that isn't right? Am I too far away from the tee? Am I too close? What's my backswing like? That's what I wanted, right? And that's what I think anybody wanting to learn how to play golf would want exactly the same experience, right? And you could apply that to any sport or any discipline that you're trying to learn. Is you want someone to give you that personal attention. It's a little bit like, if you know that what is going to get you a better chance of results if you're looking to lose weight? Is it going to the gym by yourself, or is it hiring a personal trainer who kind of keeps you right? It's always the latter. Okay, so in sales, again, kind of bringing back, do our salespeople want to sit there in a classroom and be taught like here's how to handle objections? Yeah, I guess they do probably want a little bit of that. But what they really want is, hey, I want you to hear how I try to deal with that in a real life selling situation. Tell me, what could I have done differently? That's how people want to learn. It's how we want to learn in our personal life. It's how our salespeople are craving learning in the workplace. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Measure things that are hard to measure. This is quite key, right? Because it's very easy to kind of measure things like what someone says in a sales call. Maybe what's more difficult is the softer skills that come around it, which are really key. So I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit around like what you determine as soft skills in the salespeople that you work with, and yeah, just kind of some of the small details that you identify when you're doing your ongoing training and coaching of those reps on their soft skills.
Oh, you might have to help me here, Rich. I'm going to ask you the question back. Like, what do you think your 3 strongest soft skills are?
Yeah, so for me, when it comes to sales, like so much of in sales is not necessarily say what you say, it's how you say it, right? So a soft skill is like working on someone's tonality or someone's pacing, can literally make or break. You could say the same thing twice to a prospect and get a very different outcome. And so this is one of the things that I often work on with my sales reps is they said probably the right thing. They just said it in the complete wrong way. They didn't have the right pacing. They didn't have the right inclination at the end of their sentence. They said it in a way that maybe was antagonizing. So that's some examples of, kind of what I see. But yeah, I'd love to see if that's kind of similar in your world.
You get so many different people from different countries, different upbringings, especially like where like the back end of the current climate, and it's how you sort of accommodate each person to their own style. It's like a brand, right? They want to have their own style, and also you don't want to come across like as in you should be changing your tone and pace. We actually have like a structure, so it's actually part of the feedback form we enable our reps to have on Allego. And that like is a structure of a BD call. So it does have those soft skills such as rapport, tone, energy.
Energy, nice.
No, I'm pretty. That's one of the pretty ones I'll go with. That and rapport, I've mastered. Yeah, but it's just how they're going in. These people that they're going to be calling probably don't expect their call.
Right.
Rich, I'm not too sure how many cold calls you get a day, right?
Yeah, probably not as many as you think, but when I do get them, it's always a surprise.
Yeah, it's scary that people don't do it, isn't it? Because I'm sure Rich, you're smiling right now. If I was emailing you, I can't see how you are or feel how you're coming across.
Right.
But the importance of I'm not too sure if you heard of DISC, which is the behavior types.
Yeah.
And usually you have the first 20 or 7 or 23 seconds to identify what type of person you'll be speaking to.
Yeah.
And you will get so many different types of like people that you can speak to, and they might switch halfway through and go look quite technical, especially if you just know like the sales technique to try and have a meeting. But it's identifying how you adapt to that. I feel like in the early stages of reps and their career, like I mentioned, the reference of like Monday mornings, or they've gone out on the Thursday, they're coming in Friday. You might be lucky and come across someone that doesn't like respond from energy, and the prospect might be pretty monotone and want you to get straight to the point and be direct. You know, if you've got 60 seconds now, I'll roll the dice. It's how you think creatively on the spot. But I think there's loads of different variations of like soft skills, isn't there? But it's how you apply that to give yourself the best advantage.
I think you've used some brilliant examples there of like, actually, when it comes to selling, no matter what part of the sales process that you're at, whether you're top of funnel or mid funnel, is that prospects are different. And if you can't adapt yourself to match the profile of the person that you're speaking with, are they more direct? Are they more chatty? Are they more reserved? You know, can be the downfall of a lot of salespeople. And again, you can't necessarily just learn this just by, you know, having someone sit down and be taught all the disc styles. They have to actually experience it. They have to be pointed out, hey, did you know that you were speaking with someone that fit that profile and you were kind of on the other end of the spectrum here and it just didn't work? And again, this is the beauty of how people want to learn these days. They don't want to, they want the experiential of like, I want you to show me what someone who is a high D, someone who's very direct is actually like. I want to hear what that sounds like and how I could change my style. Okay, and then I guess coming back to something that I've hinted at in the earlier on in the conversation is, you know, we think about onboarding as an example, right? We bring people on board and we teach them loads of information about this is who we sell to and this is the sales process and, you know, these are the objections that you're likely going to get and this is the competition that we typically run into. And again, it's so much information, but the challenge with that information is that it lacks context. Okay, you can tell me to the cows come home about this objection that we get a lot in our sales calls. But guess what? Until I can actually hear it, I can actually hear it in action. I don't truly believe it, or I don't truly understand the context of when it comes up. So I just want to know maybe a little bit, Iona, of how have you guys at EngageTech and EngageIQ kind of leveraged real calls and example calls for maybe new people coming into the business to learn from, and what's the impact that you've seen on people having access to that type of content?
I think just short and sweet. No one wants to be learning and watching a video for 40 minutes around you doing a session with other people.
Right.
It really detaches from the actual purpose, the interaction. And you did it at the start, Rich, right? Right, or tell me where you're from. And it's getting that engagement. I think a good example is having those calls and getting someone from your team to send you a call, and like a bad call, not a good one. There's no
right.
But understanding and pausing before like or just after the prospect's finished speaking, being like, right, you're in the room with me now. What did you want to say now? Or what could we have said? And it's actually just being like, what were you thinking on the phone, and how can we separate that from being in the room to thinking differently? But I think just like rule number one, short, sweet, there, then, let's help. But yeah.
Comes back to that learning in the flow of work, right? It's learning about the stuff that they need when they want to learn it. And we've seen this approach. You know, I'd love to kind of see if people in the audience agree with me here. Is I want you to imagine that you're a salesperson, right? Put yourself back in the shoes that you're carrying a bag. And if you join a company, and if the company said, hey, as part of your onboarding, we're going to give you access to like real example calls, people who are selling the product that you're going to be selling to the markets that you're going to be selling, and that you're going to have basically like libraries of these calls to listen and learn from. Tell me a salesperson who would not find that valuable. And I'm going to hedge my bet saying that they would choose that content over the kind of the formal learning content that they sit down and go through every day of the week, right? Because it's all about reality. It's like, again, I'll bring this to my personal life. Do I want to watch a video with some theory about how to swing a club, or do I want to watch a professional actually swing a club? I want to watch the second one because that's more relatable. Okay, so let's kind of start to wrap things up. So bringing it all together. So we've established that as far as ongoing learning, informal content is what our salespeople crave these days. They want the stuff that is curated from their peers. They want to learn stuff that's actually happening in reality. The way to do that is by capturing, in an ideal world, real conversations that are taking place, or even just recording best practice pitches or their peers in different situations. You mentioned it before, Iona. It's short and sweet. It's bite-sized. People don't want to sit there for an hour. They want to learn something in 5 minutes, right? It's why we go on a YouTube video. We'll always pick the one that's 2 to 3 minutes in length versus the one in 20 that's 30 minutes in length. Coach often and consistently to maintain morale. You've talked a bit about the people who maybe not having a good time of it. They may be struggling. They working from home or whatever that may be. And when you keep them when you coach them, so it's a way of keeping them engaged and picking them back up. We've talked about collaboration, how so much of what can be learned in today's modern way of learning is through our peers, listening to what they're doing, but it's also through self-coaching, having the ability to replay what we're actually doing and being able to self-reflect on how we can improve. But ultimately, none of this is very easy without providing tools and technology to help this. You can obviously try and tackle this in multiple ways, but without technology, this becomes a very, very hard task to achieve. So welcome any questions from the audience. If there is any questions, Kelsey, I don't know if you want to come back on and if any have came through in the private channels, please do scan the QR code there if you'd like to get access to one of our most popular resources, which is the Sales Coaching Handbook. But yeah, over to Kelsey with any questions.
He's stealing my clothes, Rich. He's stealing my clothes. That was great, guys. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed that. It is time for Q&A, as Rich mentioned. So if you haven't submitted a question yet and you would like to, please do so now so we can pick them up. And as Rich mentioned, you can scan that QR code to download a free copy of the Sales Coaching Handbook, which is indeed one of our best performing resources. I have a couple of questions to ask you both, if that's all right. We'll give everyone else a chance to feed in their questions. First one, how do you keep learners engaged when you're not necessarily in the same room as them? So we know that, since COVID, everyone's dispersed. Most businesses operate on a bit of a hybrid scale. So what do you do when you're not getting that face-to-face time with your sellers?
I'll jump in first, and I'll hand over to Iona. So we're a remote sales team here first and foremost at Allego, and I've got people on my team who are all across the UK, quite frankly. But we also collaborate very closely with our US team, who are on a completely different time zone. Never mind a different location. And some of the things that we do to support that is we make use of live sessions as a team, but we bring real life selling data into those sessions. So we do things like every week we do call breakdown sessions as a team. Everybody jumps on Zoom, but where it's not just generic training, it's actually we're basing on here's a real life call that took place in the team that someone submitted, and then we kind of listen to that as a group collectively. And those sessions are really powerful. They get everybody engaged. Everybody learns, not just the person that was involved in the call. Everybody is sharing the same experiences. And the other thing that we do as well is we have things like Slack channels set up where our platform will actually automatically alert those channels when certain things happen on calls. So one of those examples is here. When one of our outbound reps makes a call, they book a meeting, or one of our AEs closes a deal, what happens is the Slack channel will light up with links to the calls that took place in those situations. So here's the call that led to the book meeting. Here's the initial discovery call that ended in the closed deal. Every salesperson on the team wants to listen to those calls. Believe me, they want to hear what happened in those calls that led to a successful outcome. And that is how you can keep people engaged when you're not in the same office with them. And I'll hand over to Iona with any tips that she has.
I'll just chip in there as well. It's the marketing team want to listen to those calls as well, because that's so useful for us from my selfish perspective.
Absolutely.
No, they sound good. I love the like all jumping on for a call and going through those, like listening to like a real example of what's going on in the calls and how you can get better. I think just probably like to probably pick on maybe one of Rich's points is definitely how we like keep our teams motivated is we have a Slack channel of which every time someone makes a meeting, so on average at EngageTech, EngageIQ, we're aiming towards like 35 meetings, like new business opportunities made a day for our clients and customers and our own like AEs and sales team. It's getting that instant gratification, that recognition. Some people have started putting GIFs with their meetings, like prospects and me, like it's all sort of like that visual concept. When everyone's at home, you can still read that general channel where you have X amount of people, and then really creating that like culture, that recognition, that competition, and that drive across the team, just to ensure that, right, okay, someone's just made a meeting, I need to make one now. What are they doing? And actually having the access to be able to know, right, that person's calling at this time of the day and they found success. Let me jump onto their call and see how they went into and did an introduction. A lot of people will fear like calling pre 9 a.m. and post 5 p.m. But a lot of people have success. That's like our data suggests that's probably the best time to call these like professionals and prospects. So how are they going into that call and actually just getting that life, like real example of doing that and that being identified by Slack, etc.
Nice. Yeah, you can't beat that real life, real world scenario conversation. Okay, one more question if we've got time just before we finish up. In each of your opinions, what do you think is the main factor in keeping your salespeople happy and motivated so that you ultimately retain the talent within your teams?
Right though, first, Rich, is that all right?
Yeah, go for it.
No one enjoys going to work and clock watching. There's no one that I know that enjoys going to work and isn't challenged, that isn't learning and doing those Monday tasks that they do every single day. It's enabling your teams to have a structure, a plan in place to how they get better, and tracking that from a data perspective on how they've performed, whether that's quarterly reviews. Can you give them like personal gifts to remind them like that they feel valued? I know we're coming up to Christmas, etc. It's probably like a bad time for some like companies. You go home, you reflect, are you happy? But like ensuring that if you were to get like a personal gift from like the company, will that make you feel valued? What does? What is the right decision?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. You know, it really correlates to what we've talked about in today's webinar. Is like most salespeople, the thing that keeps them motivated is knowing that they're growing and they're developing in their current company. If they don't feel that way, they feel like they're going stale, then they're going to probably go somewhere else, quite frankly. And so the best way that you can motivate salespeople is to let them see that most salespeople are motivated by money, right? And they need to see that actually getting better at sales, getting better at selling is the path to that outcome. So if you can genuinely demonstrate like a commitment and developing them, not just like I think a lot of people out there, they think, hey, my salesperson got an intense 4 weeks of onboarding when they joined the company. Like, look at how great we are at training our salespeople. Like, that's not, you need to kind of get those thoughts out your head anymore. Salespeople are, as we've established, that's important, but it's everything that happens after that point. That's what's key. That's what's key in keeping your top performers, quite frankly. So yeah, it really ties into everything that we've talked about today, Kelsey, and you know, making sure that you're demonstrating your commitment to developing them and training them on an ongoing basis, not just in that first 4 weeks and feeling like you've ticked the box and you've done your job of training them.
Nice. It's all really simple stuff when you explain it in this manner, but it doesn't happen everywhere, unfortunately. So we're here to fly the flag for coaching. Okay, I think that wraps up everything for today. Thank you again for joining us. As I mentioned earlier, you will be presented with a short 3-question survey when you leave today's webinar, and we would really appreciate it if you could leave some feedback for us. And also, as a reminder, we will send out the on-demand recording within the next couple of days, so you can rewatch or share if you wish. Huge thank you to today's co-hosts. Thanks, Iona. Thank you, Rich. That was really useful. I personally enjoyed listening. And that concludes today's webinar. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we will see you all soon.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.